Welcome to my presentation. My name is Clas Svahn, and I am International Director for UFO Sweden. I'm also Chairman for Archives for the Unexplained, the world's largest archive when it comes to unexplained phenomena. I have been actively researching UFOs since 1974, and during my presentation, I will talk about what I see as the greatest UFO mystery of all time, the ghost rockets. I will also give you a glimpse of what AFU keeps in our holdings. I started my interest in UFOs as a teenager in the early 1970s, during a time when many of us had more hair and larger glasses. But my attitude regarding UFO phenomena were quite the same as they are now. I still recognize that most reports are misidentifications of natural phenomena, and that some are real, still unidentified objects. As the headline says, I am no flying saucer nerd, but a person that seeks an explanation, whatever that explanation may be. Most of my free time I spend documenting and researching this world of ours. Some years ago, UFO Sweden interviewed 1,600 people in the southern part of Sweden. More than 20 investigators knocked doors and asked people if they had seen anything in the sky that they had not been able to identify. The result was that 1 in 10 had had an experience of the unknown. Most of them had never reported it to anyone. That would mean that 1 million Swedes have seen what they would call a UFO. To be able to do this, UFO Sweden holds an annual field investigation trainee course since 1976. Last autumn, I had the opportunity to educate these 43 new and old ufologists. They are now prepared to do investigations of their own. Well, now to my point. I will tell you about 3 topics. The ghost rockets, more than 1,000 reported in 1946 alone. They stick out from the usual UFO context. Multiple witnesses, objects seen in broad daylight, distinctive sound, crashes. Hemlig, as you can see in this picture, means secreto. UFO Sweden and AFU have very good relationships with the Swedish authorities. A couple of years ago, Sandra Lindström, at that time head of the UFO desk at the Defense Research Institute, FOI, wrote this in a recommendation letter for us. The UFO desk at FOI would be virtually impossible to maintain without the support from UFO Sweden and Archives for UFO Research. Access to this archive, which is a huge repository of knowledge, gives me as the person in charge of the UFO desk the ability to identify what people report to me. To keep this archive in function is of great importance in my work. I will also tell you about our search for one more recent ghost rocket that landed and sank in a lake in 1980. But let's continue with AFU, the Archives for the Unexplained, the world's largest archive regarding UFOs and other strange phenomena. So let's start with AFU, that of course can be found on the internet as afu.se. AFU was founded in 1973 and is situated south of Stockholm, Sweden. And even though we are a physical archive, some of it can be accessed through our download page. AFU consists of 15 localities spanning over 7,000 square feet, with a shelf capacity of nearly 4,000 yards. Much of the files and books that finds their way to AFU arrives through our staff traveling to the US, Great Britain and many other countries. And here you can see our HQ, with some of the men and women working there. Let us take a look at some of our holdings. Among the 30,000 pictures are pictures of personalities, witnesses, and people connected to UFO research. And of course, of alleged UFOs. And animals that may or may not exist. 1 million newspaper articles from all around the world. Rare books. Posters. And artwork showing observations of strange entities or craft. 60,000 UFO reports from many different countries, both civilian and from different authorities. Videos, DVDs, CDs, reel-to-reels and cassette tapes. Much of it saved from defunct UFO groups. We also keep stamps with UFO and paranormal motifs, and models, and toys. But also much of other kind of artifacts, some connected to the paranormal, and others to UFOs. Every collection arrives at a sorting area. Here old paperwork is eventually labeled and put into acid-free boxes and catalogued. Our 4 libraries consist of 55,000 books. One of them is devoted to UFOs and connected topics. Every book is sorted by an index created by AFU called fan code. The same goes for our paranormal library, built and expanded from a donation of 8,000 books from paranormal researcher and author Hilary Evans and his wife Mary in London. Here you will find books on ghosts and apparitions of Virgin Mary, many of them rare and from the 1800s. As well as very hard to find magazines. In library number 3, you can find books on Atlantis, ancient astronauts, conspiracy theories, and related topics. Right now also the American physicist William Corley's files of unusual natural phenomena are situated here before they will be moved into yet another locality. And also part of the late American ufologist Wendell Stevens' correspondence. In recent years, AFU has started to build a library of science fiction books. Books that have influenced our views on both UFOs and the paranormal. One of our largest collections consists of 60,000 magazines from more than 60 countries, all sorted in compact mobile shelves. This local is also the home for files from Swedish UFO groups dating back 70 years. Reel-to-reel interviews with American contactees from the 1950s, George Adamski, Howard Menger, Truman Bathory, and the US Air Force Blue Book files on microfilm. One of the rooms harbors the files from the defunct Spanish UFO group, Centro de Estudios Interplanetarios, which folded after 50 years of activity. In a local next to AFU HQ, all scannings and most of the research are being made. Here you can also find the storage for AFU Shop, a shop that sells for $2,000 a month, and together with 50 Swedish donors and some foreign, pay for the bills. AFU have yet 5 more locals, most of them storage areas. Our newest facility is waiting for another 500 yards of mobile shelves. And we are always looking for more to save and to continue helping researchers all around the world. Thank you. Let's now turn your attention to one of the greatest UFO mysteries of all time, the ghost rockets. With the first daylight report on May 21st, 1946, preceded by many nighttime observations, this was to be the year of the ghost rockets. More than 1,000 reports in less than a year was investigated by the Swedish defense authorities. In the early 1980s, AFU found thousands of pages at the Swedish War Archives. At that point, they were still classified. Reports about cigar-shaped crafts crossing the sky 1 year before the term flying saucers were coined. And 1 year before discussions about extraterrestrial visitors started. Today we have published the documents at ghostrockets.se, many of them translated into English. And let us take a look at what was happening during 1946. During 6 months, hundreds of reports of cigar-shaped objects came pouring from all over Sweden, and Norway, and Finland, and some from Denmark. Here are some pictures and a typical report. In July 1946, it was impossible for the military to sit and watch this flood of reports anymore. A special group was formed under Colonel Bengt Jakobsson. It worked during the rest of the year, investigating hundreds of alleged sightings. Not only the Swedes showed an interest into the ghost rockets. In this letter from the British Embassy in Stockholm to the Foreign Office in London, it is stated that one British officer undercover as a tourist should travel to Sweden, and that this may be kept secret for a very limited number of high-ranking officers. In this top-secret cable from the British Foreign Office, it is clearly stated that this was something that the Swedes did not want it to share with everyone. The Americans were to be kept out. But the Americans had their own channels, and we have found copies of documents in Washington, D.C., showing that they did know what was going on. We also know that President Truman was briefed about the ghost rockets. 3 days after the ghost rocket group was formed, a very unusual string of events happened over the northern part of Sweden. Let us take a look at Friday, the 19th of July, 1946. On this day, on 4 different locations, 4 ghost rockets crashed into lakes. Kattisträsket, Kölmjärv, Vassarajärvi and Marmen. 4 lakes within 4 hours. And it all started in the village of Bölebyn outside the city of Piteå. Kjell Danielsson, 14 years of age at the time, worked out in this field together with his 2 brothers and their father. In a nearby field, a neighbor was driving a harvesting machine. Kjell Danielsson told me that the 3 boys took a break in the very hot and nice weather. It was 24 degrees Celsius and a clear blue sky. Looking towards the southern horizon, they all realized that a large object was coming over the treetops. It was flying against the wind. The boys tried to make their father ask the neighbor to shut down the harvester so that they could hear if any sound was coming from the object that now had climbed to a position right over them. But their father thought them lazy and did not ask the neighbor. During nearly 20 minutes, they could see this metallic object turning slowly around its own axis, while crossing the entire sky and eventually disappearing behind the horizon in the north. Within minutes after Kjell Danielsson lost contact with the strange flying object, an 11-year-old boy was sitting angling at the shore of a small lake 250 kilometers further north. What you see in this picture is a copy of a newspaper report of the event. As with all other witnesses that I am referring to, I have also talked with Kurt Larsson, who describes the event as frightening. Kurt Larsson heard a sound as from a very strong wind falling down from the sky. At the other end of the lake, he saw an object crashing, leaving a nearly 15-meter high column of water. He ran to his father, who was working nearby, shouting, "The devil is in the lake." Together they returned to the shore, but the object had vanished under the surface. 11:45. 15 minutes later, at Lake Kölmjärv. Knut Lindbäck and Beda Persson were out working in the fields as so many other Swedes did this beautiful summer day. On the other side of the lake was another witness, Frideborg Tagebo. Together with many other people from the village that was situated at the lake, they heard a sound as from a strong storm approaching from above. When they turned their attention to the sky, they all saw an elongated, cigar-shaped craft falling towards the lake. The grey craft, estimated to be 2 meters long, had 2 small wings at its sides. Seconds later, a big splash was heard, and a column of water was thrown up in the sky, directly followed by an explosion and another huge column of water. The windows were rattling, and dogs and cats ran for shelter. When Knut Lindbäck took his boat out to the point of impact, he could see large water lilies cut off from the bottom and stones and mud thrown onto the shore. 3 hours and 50 minutes later, and a couple of 100 kilometers further north, a whole family heard a strong and prolonged thunder and went outside their summer cottage. Ulla Axberg, who I talked to, was 17 at the time and remembers seeing an object crashing into the lake and traveling under the surface until it exploded a couple of 100 meters away on the other side of a small bay. A large column of water was thrown into the air, and bushes and vegetation was moving as from a strong wind. 40 minutes after that, further south, the family was out sunbathing at the shore of Lake Marmen. Ingrid Sander told me that she heard a very strong noise and saw an object hitting the surface near the shore. She could see the strange object skipping over the water surface, leaving a wake after it, before exploding with a 20-meter column of water thrown up in the sky. Seconds later, she could see the water turn black. One day after the crashes, the Swedish military sent investigators to one of the lakes, Lake Kulmjärv, where the ghost rocket had been seen cutting water lilies and throwing large stones up on the shore. 2 experts on radiation were sent from Stockholm since the Defence Research Institute suspected that the craft being powered by nuclear material and remotely controlled by TV. A week later, a raft was being constructed with a metal detector on board. During 2 weeks of search, 35,000 samples were taken from the seafloor. An indentation was found at the site where Knut Lindbäck had seen the object crash and explode. But in spite of using an electric mine-sweeping device beside the metal detector, nothing was found. The British were not impressed by the search in Kulmjärv, or by the Swedish ghost rockets hunt in general. They called it extremely slow and probably unproductive, and the recovery operations uninspired. The radar reports highly inaccurate. In 1984, I interviewed Carl-Gösta Barthold, the man who led the search in Lake Kulmjärv and the man you saw on the raft. I suspect that the bomb was manufactured from a lighter material, for example a magnesium alloy. It probably disintegrated, which the second water column indicates. We did find the point of impact. In the mud on the seafloor, we could see how stones and gravel were laying thrown away from the bottom layer beneath them, he told me. Let us listen to him. This is an interview I made with Carl-Gösta Barthold in 1984.
Skulle ni också försöka gömma undan det för civilbefolkningen på något sätt?
Det sades inte, men det ansåg jag var självklart att man skulle göra. Men vi kunde inte hitta ett enda metallfragment.
Var inte det väldigt förbryllande?
Jo, vi förstod inte hur det kunde undgå att finnas.
Var det någonsin någon tvekan om att någonting hade slagit ner?
Det var aldrig någon tvekan om det.
There were of course many other sightings during 1946. One of the most interesting took place in the central part of Sweden on August 14 at 10 o'clock in the morning. Pilot Gunnar Idholm and his navigator had changed their route to avoid a threatening storm cloud with lightning and were flying the B-18 bomber at 250 meters above the ground. Suddenly they saw a 15-meter-long cigar-shaped object with no wings, no tail fin, and no cockpit, crossing the path in front of them. Edholm decided to take up the chase and turned his aircraft, trying to follow the cigar at a speed of 800 kilometers an hour. In this drawing you can see Lieutenant Edholm's plane in red, trying to overtake the Ghost rocket in black. But after a couple of minutes they were outflown. Seeing the strange craft heading straight into the storm cloud they themselves had tried to avoid out of security reasons. After 6 months of investigations and nearly a year of reports of strange objects in the sky, the Ghost Rocket Committee sent their report to the Supreme Commander in December 1946. They concluded 973 reports between April 25th and November 29th. 450 of these non-astronomical. 225 of these real objects. 42% cigar-shaped objects with no wings. 8% cigar-shaped objects with wings, and 100 imported impacts. The origin of the Ghost rockets was never identified. The Ghost rockets peaked in 1946, but observations of those cigar-shaped objects did not stop after that. Let me tell you about a very special observation that took place east of Stockholm on Sunday 18th of July 1948. At 11 o'clock a man was sitting reading his morning newspapers with this fantastic view in front of him. But suddenly the stillness was interrupted by a sound as from a strong wind coming from the south. In his diary he wrote, "Unusual projectile, 2 meters in length, 100 meters over the lake. The speed is high." When he turns his eyes to the left part of the lake, he can see a cigar-shaped object fly over an outdoor bathing facility. But suddenly it changes direction and turns towards him before crashing into the lake. Just before it sinks he can see the sun reflecting what looks like a metallic hull. Together with a friend he rows to the area where the cigar had crashed, but looking down he can see nothing but darkness. It is 18 meters deep under the 2 men. At 11:32 they are back on the shore. But this man was not an ordinary witness. General Helge Ljung, Supreme Commander of the Swedish Armed Forces between 1944 and 1951, was the man witnessing the Ghost rocket crash. Probably one of the highest-ranking UFO witnesses of all time. General Ljung ordered a reconnaissance aircraft to patrol the Swedish borders and a radar alert around the country. A ship especially designed to assist sunken submarines was sent to the lake. These documents are from the ship's DEG and diving log. The search was top secret. The logbooks doesn't even tell what the crew was looking for. Search for an object is all they say. To avoid questions, the rumor was spread around the lake that the search was for a diamond ring lost by the general's wife. On board the search vessel was Mr. Hilding Bjurstedt, in charge of the diving operations. When I met him in 1999, he told me that the seafloor was covered with a layer of mud, several meters thick, which made the search very problematic. In spite of the secrecy, we have found a former classified document in an archive in Washington, D.C. Here you can see that the American intelligence got a part of the story, but not the man. The document is wrong in many respects and tells of an explosion and of a crater at the bottom. And it speculates that the missile was launched from Estonia. It also says that Swedish military thought that the object was a flying saucer. Is it still there? Well, nobody knows. I have read the diary of Helge Jung, and on several occasions he writes about the crash and the ongoing search for the object. But his last entry about the ghost rocket he saw is very strange. On October 20th, he writes, Major Frank Servell reports a catch in Vomfjärden. Divers go down tomorrow. At that time, the search vessel was long gone and there were no divers in the area. Who found something in the lake? What was it? After writing this, General Jung never mentioned the crash or search again. Let us turn to my last item, and to a more recent ghost rocket. Bo Berg, section manager at the Swedish War Archives, and his wife Liz, head of 3 schools in the Stockholm area, were out hiking in Muddus National Park in the extreme north of Sweden on July 31st, 1980. It was 11:50, and they stopped for a short break. The weather was nice, but cloudy. Suddenly they heard a noise coming from the south. A strange craft came flying towards them, less than 100 meters over the ground. When it passed right over them, they estimated the length to be between 3 and 5 meters. They followed the ghost rocket, flying towards the lake behind them, Lake Namajaure. But instead of passing the lake, the object turned 180 degrees and came back towards them. In his diary, Bo Berg wrote just hours later, First I thought it was an airplane, then a cruise missile, then a UFO. The 2 baffled witnesses could see the strange craft descending on the lake with a splash, and after a few seconds it started to sink, bubbles of air coming from it. Coming back to Stockholm, they reported their sighting to this man, Sture Wickertz, at that time head of the UFO desk at the Defense Research Institute. Wickertz, whose notes you can see here, checked radar, aircraft, helicopters and nearby shooting ranges, but found no solution to the mystery. He even ordered a helicopter trying to locate the craft, but the water was too muddy and nothing could be seen. After that, the story was forgotten for many years until I found Mr. Wickert's notes in the files. Together with the witnesses traveled a team of UFO Sweden members and experts. The lake is situated right in the middle of nowhere. To bring equipment and personnel there requires special permission from authorities, the area being a national park, and a helicopter to lift our 1,300 kilos of equipment. Here I will show you a short film clip about our search. Kan du inte ens göra det känns fel. We also covered the lake with a side-scan sonar. And after a couple of hours, the entire lake was scanned. After looking through the sonar film, we sent divers down the next day. But they discovered the same problems as at the lake where General Jung had seen his object crash in 1948. Here you can see the message from one of the divers to the other. Damn it. It is completely impossible. The floor of the lake was covered with several meters of mud. An object sinking in the lake would immediately have been covered by the mud. The film crew documented our every step. It resulted in a 1-hour documentary shown on Swedish television later the same year. A documentary you can buy if you like. Here you can see me broadcasting live from the Search on the Ghost Rockets project's Facebook site. Well, the weather was not always good. In 2014, we went back to the lake with equipment that could see down into the deep mud. And we did get one interesting radar return. Here you can see a large object resting in the mud. What it is, we do not know. But the new expedition is already planned. This time, probably in the winter, with snowmobiles, to look through the ice with 3D radar to see what the object really looks like. For the first time, we will be able to see what the ghost rocket really looks like, and maybe solve a 60-year-old enigma. Ghost rockets are still crashing into lakes. On the 27th of July 1999, 7 persons were outside a summer house at Lake Backsjön in the west of Sweden. Not far from the Norwegian border, and the sun was shining, and several in the group enjoyed the nice day at the shore. At 5:30 in the afternoon, a sound like a thunder from a fighter jet was heard, and one of the men, who was standing 100 meters from the rest of the group, looked up and could soon see a cigar-shaped object with wings or tanks at the side of the body flying over, heading for the lake. And this is a drawing made by one of the witnesses. Down at the lake, 5 others were sunbathing when they heard the sound and the shouting from the man. Seconds later, they could all see the strange object diving straight into the water with a splash. Another witness at the other side of the lake could see the same thing. After calling the police and the military, a search started with 8 divers and a mini submarine. The operation was classified under the name Operation Lake Find. To cover up what they were doing, the military planted a cover story and lied to the journalists who asked about their activity, saying that it was all a military exercise. A large area at the north end of the lake was combed for traces of the unknown craft. After returning to Stockholm with nothing to report, the group was sent back a couple of weeks later to make another try. But in September, the military realized that they were not to find anything, and the operations closed. As soon as UFO Sweden got information about the observation, we sent a team to the lake. We also started to see if we could find a solution to the observation. With the help from our contacts within the military radar unit, we could see that the commercial aircraft was passing from Stockholm to Gardermoen in Norway. This aircraft passed north of the lake at the time of the observation. So our question was, did the aircraft drop something? It is not unheard of that aircraft has lost parts during flight. Windows, landing gear, and other parts have been falling off on different occasions. But no, when we checked with the aircraft carrier and the airport, nothing had been wrong with the aircraft. But there was another option: ice. Ice is rather often reported to drop from aircraft, but at this time experts we consulted found it unlikely. The time the aircraft has spent at flight level where ice could have been formed had been too short. When UFO Sweden managed to get a copy of the secret report, unclassified, we could see that the military experts had investigated these ideas as well. But as UFO Sweden, the military concluded that it was hard to find an easy explanation to the witnesses' observations. I have personally interviewed all of the 7 witnesses at the lake. I have no doubt that they saw a real object that at this point defies explanation. Sometimes ghost rockets can cause incidents that could have ended in disaster. On April 21, 1991, the captain of an Alitalia flight from Milano to London, Mr. Achilles Saghetti, encountered an unknown object in the sky above the British Channel. Mr. Saghetti told me that he and his co-pilot had been talking to each other for a couple of minutes, but now had turned their attention straight in front of the aircraft. The evening was clear, and the sun was still visible at flight level. Several other aircrafts were flying in front of his MD-80, waiting for clearance to make their final approach to Heathrow. Mr. Saghetti and his co-pilot were both looking out to make sure that they had the nearest aircraft in sight. But suddenly, slightly from the left, an unknown object came flying on a near collision course to the aircraft. When I interviewed Mr. Saghetti, he told me that the object looked like a missile, light brown in color, flying slightly higher than his own aircraft. Immediately after they lost track of the missile, Mr. Saghetti called the air traffic control center and asked the operator if they could see anything on their radar screens. The answer, as you can see on this near-collision report that Mr. Saghetti filled out after landing, the answer was, "I see an object, an unknown object. Target 10 nautical miles behind you." So the object they had encountered was real. After landing, Mr. Saghetti got in contact with the air traffic control center, again asking them what it was that he and his crew had encountered. The answer made him drop his jaw. "They told me it was a helicopter," he said to me over the phone. But nothing about the statement was right. The speed was wrong. The flight level was wrong. The appearance was wrong. A couple of days later, the incident made the headlines of Sunday Times. Jet in near miss with mystery missile over Kent coast. In spite of the helicopter explanation, the British military started an investigation of their own. And I'm very sorry for this map. The dotted lines on this radar plot, made by the military investigators, shows the Alitalia aircraft flying in over the Kent coast to 24,000 feet, passing near a shooting range called Lyd. From Lyd, the British Army tests its missiles. And in an answer to the commander at Lyd stated that their missiles could not reach the height that Achille Saghetti's aircraft was flying at. The conclusion was that whatever object it was that nearly had hit the Italian aircraft, it was not possible to identify it. The official statement was that it was a UFO and therefore should not be investigated any further. That was also the answer I got from the civil aviation authorities when I wrote to them. The Ministry of Defense had no report of any space activity which could provide an explanation. The description of the object does not correspond to that expected had it been a meteorological balloon. The investigation has therefore been closed and the sighting will be listed as an unidentified flying object. Case closed. It was a UFO, it was seen on radar, but it was not of any interest. With this selfie of myself and my son Nicholas at the shore of Lake Namajaure, with the northern lights in the sky behind us, I thank you for your attention. Hopefully our next expedition to this remote lake will help us shed some light on a mystery that has puzzled ufologists for years. Thank you so much, and if you want to get in contact with me, you have my details here.